Gospel according to Luke. There was a scholar of the law who stood up to test Jesus and said, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus said to him, "What is written in the law? How do you read it?" He said in reply, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your being, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." He replied to him, "You have answered correctly. Do this, and you will live." But because he wished to justify himself, he said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man fell victim to robbers as he went down from Jerusalem to Jericho. They stripped him and beat him and went off, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down that road, but when he saw him, he passed by on the opposite side. Likewise, a Levite came to the place, and when he saw him, he passed by on the opposite side. But a Samaritan traveler who came upon him was moved with compassion at the sight. He approached the victim, poured oil and wine over his wounds, and bandaged them. Then he lifted him up on his own animal, took him to an inn, and cared for him. The next day he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper with the instruction, 'Take care of him. If you spend more than what I have given you, I shall repay you on the way back.' Which of these 3, in your opinion, was the neighbor to the robber's victim?" He answered, "The one who treated him with mercy." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." The Gospel of the Lord. Yesterday morning, as I was eating breakfast, I read CNN. And in the midst of all of the violence and discord that we've seen in our country in the last week, the headline was simply, "Who can heal us?" It was a question. Now, as a Catholic priest, I think I have a pretty convincing answer. Politicians are saying that the answer is that we treat each other with dignity and learn to treat each other as equals, which is certainly true. In the Declaration of Independence, our founders stated that all men are created equal. And they further stated that this concept of equality among men and women is self-evident. But what makes it self-evident? Only the idea of a Christian worldview. The idea that each of us is created in the image and likeness of God. That was a presupposition for the founders who built the country, regardless of revisionist history, built the country on Christian principles. And so that idea that each of us, as the book of Genesis states, is created in the image and likeness of God, that we are sons and daughters of the Father, is how it is self-evident that we are created equal. We express this equality among ourselves imperfectly. We know that it took over 80 years to end slavery in this country after the Declaration of Independence, and many more years to gain equality under the law between people who are white and people who are African American. But Christians were the ones who were fighting for this equality, and if you read what the abolitionists were writing, it was most often pointing to this idea that God created us as equals, and that this is enshrined in our founding documents. It was a Christian ideal. I don't think it's any accident that the name that we most often associate with the drive for equality is Martin Luther King, and that he was the Reverend Martin Luther King. That's no accident, because he saw that his faith drove him to this fight for equality and for dignity across all people. Today, we have an increasingly atheistic and utilitarian idea of who man is, who women are. We'll pay lip service to the idea that we're all equal, but it's not enshrined in our hearts anymore as we move further and further away from Christ. A perfect example is to look at those with serious disabilities. Now, everyone will pay lip service to the fact that they believe that somebody with a severe disability is equal to anybody else. But where does that belief come from? It's not a materialistic or utilitarian belief. Certainly the person without any challenges is more able to contribute economically and materially to society. And the proof is in our statistics. Because the people who don't believe in a Christian God will say over and over again that there is equality. The atheists like to say that they can be good without God. But if we look at the statistics, between 75 and 90% of children who are detected to have serious intellectual or physical disabilities in the womb are aborted. That's the fact. That equality is not borne out in any way in our society. These children are cast away. And so our government, including many so-called Catholic politicians, support the option to kill those who are less equal than others. So what we're looking for in this country, or what we say we are, this equality that transcends race, ethnicity, social status, wealth, disability, it's only found in one person, and that's Jesus Christ. That's what our gospel is all about. We have the Samaritan who finds this man who has been stripped of his dignity. The robbers came and took everything. And when the Samaritan came by, there was no utilitarian or earthly reason for him to help the man who was beaten and naked beside the road. He could see that he had nothing. And yet, he's the one who stops. And who are the ones who don't stop? The priest and the Levite, who are a sort of priestly caste of that time. Which means that the ones who are most supposed to be looking out for those who are being treated less equally are the very ones who should be helping this man, which is an indictment on all of us, to say that we should always be aware that our actions are in line with the faith that we profess, that when we profess our faith in just a few moments, that our actions when we leave the church are in line with what we've just said. And so it's the Samaritan, the one who people would least expect to help, who helps this man. And that's the man who is the Christian. So Jesus points to him and says, this is the way you treat others with dignity. And this is ultimately the way that you get to heaven. So in the midst of all of this discord and violence that we've seen, really for a long time, but especially we've become aware of it in this week, my advice is, first of all, for each of us to build our relationship with the Lord, wherever it is now, to deepen that. Mother Teresa was famously asked one time that if she could change anything in the church, what would it be? And her answer was, I would change you and me. In other words, the thing that we actually have control over is ourselves and the way we react to others and the way we spread the gospel message. And that's not only in the church, how would you change the church, but indeed, how would you change the world? By changing ourselves, first and foremost. Second, I would recommend that you pray daily, that our nation rediscover its Christian center. Imagine how much better life would be if everyone was following the 10 Commandments, one of which is, thou shalt not kill. And yet these are the very commandments that we rip out of our public spaces today. We wonder why we are doing the things we do as a society, even as we tear down the Ten Commandments across the nation. And finally, wherever you find yourself, at work, at school, or even among your friends and family, share the real solution to all of this. Every politician and every ethicist has their own idea of how we can fix this, every sociologist. But there's really only one, and that's Jesus Christ, because without him there is no equality. It's only in our humanity, grounded in that dignity given to us by the Father, that we find that we're all really the same. So the gospel means good news. It's the good news that we're all looking for. But it's not the kind of news you'll hear on CNN.